Sunday morning. We are live. You're joining us here on a live edition of Unfiltered. Officially, it'll go down as episode number 294. In your scorecards, you can join and get on board 24/7, 365. Jump on board the Unfiltered Revolution. Is easy. Apple, Spotify, everywhere you get your podcasts. You can join us on the artist, formerly known as Twitter, X, if you will, at Casey Stern. Get up into the bio, follow through onto the YouTube channel. You'll get all the content, all the interviews, the conversations, the rants, the guests, and more over there. We are also now live on Instagram. Join us at Unfiltered with Casey Stern. You can get us all sorts of ways, hopefully every way, and comment, conversate along the way. I love all of that, and I respond to each and every one of you. It is good to have you on board and appreciate the support. As always, speaking of support, we're presented by our good friends at Bet Online. I've got a ton to get to here on this show, impromptu, and I'm going to be totally honest and transparent with you. If and hopefully I can fake it till you make it. It sounds like I didn't get much sleep. I didn't get much sleep, and I'm not a morning person, and it is sitting here at 9 o'clock as I do this. If you're listening on the podcast, Apple, Spotify, everywhere you get them on a Sunday. And the UFC 300 pay-per-view, I think, ended maybe somewhere right before like 2 o'clock. The main event, Pereira and Hill, didn't go on until upwards of about 1:15 a.m. on the East Coast. And then I had to stick around and listen to what everybody had to say afterwards, and the pressers and Dana White and the announcement of Conor McGregor and Chandler finally and officially. And now we got Dustin Poirier and Islam Makhachev. And then I'm sitting there and, trying to toss and turn and somehow recover. And I've been a diehard UFC fan since almost day one, not UFC one, but tough one, where, I sat there, watched the whole season of that show leading up to the Forrest Griffin and the late Stephan Bonner and all of that, and have been diehard and rarely missed a pay-per-view. I don't even miss an Apex card ever since. And I don't know that I've ever left a pay-per-view as stuck in my chair. I can't believe, with the Leon Edwards, the head kick, headshot, bang, and you look at me now against Kamaru Usman. We had some of those moments, but never sitting there from start to finish, 6-7 hours, couldn't miss anything, and then couldn't even get up, and it wasn't even from the last two fights. It was from what I will say, and I hate hyperbole, but it's hard for me not to say, is the craziest moment I have ever witnessed in the UFC as a fan of this sport. Then I got all the baseball. You got Angel Hernandez, which when he's in the news, if you followed me on radio over the last decade and a half, 2 decades, it is one of, when I say favorite, I mean it facetiously because it's one of my least favorite things to discuss, but my favorite things to harp on, which is the fact that if anyone else, I don't care what you do for a living, your neighbor, your friend, your sister, your in-laws, it don't matter. No matter who they are, if anyone ever did their job as poorly as he does his, they wouldn't have a job. He's still got a job. We'll get into all of that. And all of you, you can comment along the way if you're here on the live variety. Of course, not Apple, Spotify, everywhere you get your podcast, where please give us a 5-star rating. Tell all your friends, because we want more friends to get on board the Unfiltered Revolution. In the meantime, we do want to let you know, as always, we're presented by our good friends at Bet Online before we get started. Number one source for all your sports betting needs, latest odds, lines, and matchup reports, baseball, basketball, boxing, golf, and more. Bet Online, your fastest and easiest way to get your wagers, live betting, favorite casino and card games, they're all available to play right from your phone. So get to the website, head over to your mobile device, do it now, get in on the action. Remember to use the promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV. It'll get you a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. It is Bet Online, where the game starts as I get started here. If you would have bet on fight of the night before last night, you would have bet on Holloway and Gaethje. If you would have bet on fight of the year before last night, you would have bet on Holloway and Gaethje. Even tweeted out, despite discussing it in the podcast, just a couple hours you can go check before this started, and replying to somebody that is going to be a fight of the year candidate for sure. And we already knew all that, and everybody knew all that. And somehow, and this is the great thing about sport, and we don't give enough credit to sometimes the athletes who do it. LeBron James, regardless of all the expectations you could have possibly had about what LeBron was supposed to do when you were watching him when he was in high school, he exceeded them all. And if you don't think so, you're an idiot. Rarely do events when you lead up to a movies. What happens most often? You hear about a movie, oh my God, it's going to be the second coming. This is going to be the greatest movie anyone has ever seen. This movie is going to blow you away. And then you get to the movie and it is a dud because you're sitting there and you're disappointed. There was not a thing that was disappointing about UFC 300 in general, but certainly not about this fight. And if you are not a UFC fan and you're a baseball fan, and I will get to all the baseball, and you were listening to me for the baseball side, and you don't like, fighting, or you haven't been into it, just go and watch the viral clip of the last 10 seconds of this fight, then go backward, just like you saw if you saw some crazy clip from a TV show and then went back and watched it, like in Breaking Bad. And a lot of people, you check in and go, oh, that happened, and then they jump in, or Game of Thrones, and they jump in, or you're sitting there and you don't listen to a somebody or a band, but you go check out a song or you hear something live or you're at a concert or whatever, and boom, then you go ahead and you kind of backtrack, and now you're into all of their stable of albums. Get into the stable of the UFC if you're not. And that 10 seconds don't draw you in, nothing's going to draw you in, because the last 10 seconds of this fight were the craziest 10 seconds in the history of the UFC. In the history of the sport. Crazier than the end of Bonner and Griffin. Crazier than the head kick from Leon Edwards. Crazier than the upset from Matt Serra GSP. And wherever else you want to put in, there isn't anything that tops what that was. It defined two athletes who are two of the best of their generation or any, two of the most world-class and fan favorites in their generation or any, and defined a title that people think is a kind of poo-poo title. You can go back to my conversation with my guy Ariel. I know he's not a huge fan of it. I'm curious to hear what he thinks based on what he saw last night. Then go back and get that podcast where we discuss all things UFC, Connor's return, and all of that. But, excuse me, this fight, the spinning back kick that broke Justin Gaethje's nose at the end of round one, the fact that Gaethje is bleeding out like a sieve, can't breathe, poked in both eyes, doesn't matter, and still swinging him, ended up dropping Holloway the first time he's ever been dropped, even though I guess afterwards they were saying in the press conference that it wasn't counted that way. It didn't look like a slip, though. It did look like he was knocked down, even though he's not out. And then Holloway, and I said this in the preview, if anything was going to be a problem, it was the fact that Gaethje is always there to be hit. Dustin hit him. Fiziev was hitting him in that fight. You go back to any of Justin Gaethje's fight, Chandler, he gets hit. And Max is so precise, and the most precise boxer the UFC has in any weight class, in my opinion, and has been for a long time. That was going to be a problem, and it was a problem. It was a problem. I mean, he basically was beating him from pillar to post in this fight. Then you get down to the last 10 seconds, and Max Holloway could have, as Dana White said afterwards in the press conference, paraded around in a circle and said he won, could have pointed to Ilia Topuria and started talking crap, could have done whatever he wanted, and instead he points to the middle of the octagon. He says, let's go, let's throw hands, let's do it right here. Justin misses 2 or 3 times at least, and then with a right hook right to the chin, puts Gaethje out face first with 1 second to go. It already was a legendary fight. We would be talking more about a spinning back kick that broke Justin Gaethje's nose, of all people, at the end of the first round. All of that. We're not talking about the precision and Holloway, but it changed everything, and it is the craziest moment I have ever seen as a fan of the UFC, and I am a fan of the UFC longer than most people are a fan of the UFC. I mean, it's crazy. Unbelievable fight. Curious your take, your comments, bring them to me. Obviously, if you're belated Apple, Spotify, everywhere you get your podcast, I'm curious, let me know. Where does that rank for you? And maybe it's hyperbole, maybe it's not. Look, I wasn't in the building. I got, I like both these guys. I'm not related to, I don't have anybody, I don't know them. I'm just sitting there at home, and that's the craziest thing, I'm trying to stay PG rated, I've ever seen in the UFC. Ever. Was not surprised to see Alex Pereira knock out Jamal Hill. Was surprised to see how easy it was. You want to talk about, I'll use the quote Dana said, a gangster move of Alex Pereira, who those didn't see the end of that fight. Pereira gets kicked in the acorns. And instead of where the ref is coming in, I think it was Herb Dean, and he's about to give him time, because you can get up to 5 minutes for that. He waves him off like Peyton Manning would wave off Tony Dungy trying to bring on the punt team on 4th down. Just waves him off with his right hand I think by that time he knew Jamal Hill had no chance to be in that octagon with him. And by the way, it was short, and we could talk about it, and Jamal Hill can come back and say, well, I got caught. That's not getting caught. That 90 seconds looked like Jamal Hill was a guy in the Contender Series who was fighting for the title and had no business being there. That is how different the levels seem to look in those two men. Pereira knew Jamal Hill could not hurt him and waved off the ref, walked in, waved off Herb Dean, walked in, hit him with one left and dropped him and then put him out. That was it. I mean, now wants to go up to heavyweight. Who knows what happens with that? But Pereira, my goodness. My goodness. I mean, I don't even know. We can go through every fight. The fights are amazing. All of them were amazing. Diego Lopez looked fantastic. What a stud that dude is going to be. Jalen Turner is going to be regretting a walk-off KO. For those who didn't see that, he ends up basically knocking out Moicano. And instead of jumping on him, walks away because I guess he thought Moicano was out. Moicano's not out. The round counts down the last 10 seconds. Moicano goes back to his corner, and then the next round gets on top of Turner and ends up eventually submitting him. I mean, or where's the TKO? I can't remember. But I just not what you want. Not what you want. He'll be regretting that for a while. Conor McGregor officially returning. That is all set up for UFC 303. That'll be International Fight Week. Yeah, I don't know what took so long. Again, I talked about that if you want to get the pod that I did with Ariel. But, this is something Conor has been announcing seemingly in different ways for months. Michael Chandler, when they showed him in the crowd yesterday, put up the sign and put 303. So that seemed to be said as well. I don't know why it took so long, but whatever the true reason was, whether it's the 2 fights that are left on Conor's contract and delaying him out, whether it was the fact that he was doing all the Roadhouse stuff and maybe, Conor was overstating how ready he was. I don't know. But regardless of whatever the reason is, they are finally set, and that'll go down on June. I think it's the 29th or the 27th, somewhere at the end of June, at International Fight Week at UFC 303. And we found out that at UFC 302, before that, on June 1st, it'll be Dustin Poirier who will get a chance to battle for the lightweight crown against Islam Makhachev. Obviously, when you look at the situation in this division, it seems a little bit unfair. And look, Gaethje, that's why Holloway was so respectful that Gaethje took this fight, because he had everything to lose. Gaethje was number one in line for that spot with Islam. Even Islam said he wanted to fight Gaethje and thought Gaethje was making a mistake. Gaethje would have been the guy fighting in June if he says no to this fight. And I don't know how much he was offered. I don't think he's getting pay-per-view points for the BMF. He just got an extra $300,000. Max got $600K for the bonuses, and I get all that. So money, obviously part of it, being on UFC 300, the fact that he's a badass, so he just wants to take a badass fight, and I get all of that. But he clearly put himself in harm's way of now being far off of that track, because the way that the Sarukian fight, and how crazy was that fight with Oliveira, and I'd picked Oliveira beforehand and almost was right. How crazy was that? The fact that Gilly that he ended up getting out of, speaking of Dustin Poirier with guillotines, that he ended up getting out of was the craziest thing that I've seen since the Ortega fight against Volkanovski, where you want to talk about just pure will. 99% of other people go down, especially against Charles, go down in that fight. But now Sarukian going to be there. Probably will end up getting the winner of this fight. Yeah, look, I love Dustin Poirier. He's one of my favorite 2 or 3 fighters in the UFC and has been for a long time. I don't think he has so much of a chance against Islam. I don't. Obviously, his chance is going to be with that left and finding some power with it early before Islam does to him exactly what Khabib did, and we'll see how that plays out. UFC 300 was bananas. You want to jump in on that? You can. Want to hear from you. Number of different ways. We're now on Instagram at Unfiltered with Casey Stern. You always can jump on the YouTube channel. Please like, subscribe, tell all your friends. We want the support. We openly, obviously, would love to have more support and more people know about what we're doing here. So we're asking for you to help with that and get on board the YouTube channel. Tell your friends, share it, and get with it. It's at Unfiltered with Casey Stern over there as well. But we'll do much more on the UFC moving forward. Let me shift to Major League Baseball. And I'll start here. Angel Hernandez has been a terrible umpire for many years. He has been self-serving as an umpire and selfish as an umpire for many years. Angel Hernandez has been a problem in Major League Baseball for managers, for players, for coaches, and for fans for many, many years. But it never changes. It's like in the movie What About Bob? There's a scene, if you ever seen the movie, where Dr. Leo Marvin, Richard Dreyfuss, says, "You think he's gone?" And he opens the door. He's never gone. Angel is never gone. Is it the lawsuit? Is it what he's got hanging over the head of Major League Baseball? Does he got pictures somewhere in his Facebook account? I don't know. But I know this. You could not be as bad at your job and still have a job. Your neighbor can't be as bad as their job and still have a job. Your doctor couldn't be as bad at his or her job and still have a job, yet Angel is as bad at his job as he is at his job and still has a job. Can't figure it out. Can't figure it out. It doesn't make any sense to me. Carlos gets in. He says, Angel Hernandez would have been a great umpire during the Greg Maddux era. Maddux got calls 5 feet off the plate. Look, there were a lot of, we can go back to the Eric Gregg. There were a lot of, during the Levon Hernandez start, there were a lot of guys who got calls off the plate. And there were a lot of umpires who made calls off the plate. But we didn't have as much information as we have now. And we couldn't break it down the way we do now. And this is not just about balls and strikes. If this was just about balls and strikes, it's one thing. It'll be like Angel didn't see. One of my favorite things the last couple of weeks, I used to always see those Angel Hernandez, those pics of like your telephone with the missed calls. It would be Angel Hernandez, Angel Hernandez, Angel Hernandez. And people used to tweet those to me all the time. Because for those who listen to me on SiriusXM for years, I've been all over Angel Hernandez for like 15 years now. But he was just send me those. Now, the latest one was, last week, that Angel Hernandez missed the eclipse. Angel Hernandez missed everything. Now, I'm going to be fair with you because I want you to understand that I'm trying to be unbiased here. There's a former umpire, Ted Barrett, who I'm not going to read his post because I don't know, because I'm a Facebook friend with him, and I don't know if only his friends can see it, and I don't know, it's not my style. But I will tell you, he wrote a post recently when Angel was getting crap, and I think it was even before this. Maybe this is about a week ago when Angel got crap for something else, throwing somebody out. I don't remember what it was, to be honest. And he wrote a very, very long, very, very sincere post about Angel being maybe the best person he ever worked with during all his time. And Barrett has retired, but he's a longtime umpire. Those of you who cover the sport or watch the sport obviously know the name or know him. And talking about how just fantastic of a human being and a family man Angel Hernandez is. And he gives the shirt off his back and all of that. I want to be fair. He may very well, and I've heard this before, by the way, from other other umpires, but I've heard this before. He may very well be a very nice human being. He may very well be a very caring, very supportive, very amenable, very adjustable, very sincere human being when he's not on a baseball field. When he's on a baseball field, he acts like a jackass. Sorry. He may be the greatest guy in the world, and it's very, very possible. You're John Tortorella, for those of you who are hockey fans, right? I would not want to play for him for 5 seconds. Some of the way he handles his team make me nauseous. But I've seen, and I've talked to people who know him, but I've seen, and you could see, him with kids, him with talking about animals, him dealing with families, he is seemingly an unbelievably nice human being. And as a coach, most of the time, he's kind of a jackass. So, Angel Hernandez, I don't know him personally. This isn't personal. But as an umpire, he sucks at his job, and he still has it. And whatever he's got over the league's head has got to be removed at some point. Because when it is as obvious as it was the other day, where you're literally looking and it's like the Angel Hernandez zone. It's like its own place where like strikes go out to die. When that is going on, you just can't allow that to happen. That cannot happen. But it's going to happen. There's a guarantees in life. Debt, taxes, and more Angel Hernandez. Going to happen. So be prepared. Was that The Lion King? That one? I think so. Apple, Spotify, everywhere you get your podcast, where most of you are, of course. Again, don't forget, jump on Instagram. Please do it now. Take a pause. Do it while you're doing it. Follow Unfiltered with Casey Stern. Get on the YouTube channel. Like and subscribe. Do it now. Do it while you're doing it. Unfiltered with Casey Stern. And, of course, where you can get us everywhere else on the Believe Network. Major League Baseball on the field. And by the way, best to Spencer Strider. I haven't been on Talking Baseball since then. As we get officially with the surgery, best to him. He'll be out for 2024. The Milwaukee Brewers have surprised me. They got 6 straight games with 7 or more runs. They're 10-3. I can't figure them out. I thought if there was any guarantee we had in the NL Central was that, okay, well, yeah, the Brewers, they can't do it this year, right? I'm okay, David Stearns, he's in New York now, Corbin Burns, and I'm trying to rhyme everybody, but he's sitting there, he in Baltimore, and the team's just not that good. And if anything, their offense is not going to be able to score runs. Like, I looked at the Brewers, I was like, I don't know, they always seem to find pitchers somehow that are going to overachieve, but they can't score. Like, how are they going to score? No, they're scoring. There's 6 games in a row with 7 or more runs. It's crazy. You got 10-3 start. Kudos to them. The other side, the Chicago White Sox are legendary bad. Legendarily bad? They're legendary. They're legendary level of horse poop. They are 2-12. They are so bad to watch. They are so miserable to view that I can't even imagine being a Chicago White Sox fan. Now, I say that, and I'm a Knick, an Islander, and a Met fan. I've been through hell, and I can't even imagine being a Chicago White Sox fan. That is how terrible it is to watch what has happened with the topsy-turvy way of the last decade, going back to after the Ozzie days, and every time they get expectations and they fall flat on their face, and then they're terrible, and then they're giving up, and now they're giving you this, and this product is garbage. I mean, they are hot, flaming garbage. They are terrible. Brutal. 2-12. Open the season. Most impressive team to open out of the gates is the Yankees. They're what now? 11-3. You know, it's everything coming up. Soto, you can't get out. He's been red hot. Oswaldo Cabrera, hello. He's got 11 ribbies already. Big hits left and right. Volpe in the start. He's off too. Everybody pitching. They don't even have Garrett Cole yet. The vibe is totally, totally different. The last few years with the Yankees has been, oh my God, should the GM be there? Should the manager be there? The disappointments, nobody's hitting. What about the injuries with Stanton? What about the contract with Stanton? All the pressures on Aaron Judge, and the kids, shouldn't be playing yet, or are they playing yet, or can they do this, or can they do that, and who's going to close games, and all of that, and they're not as good as the Astros, or they're not as good as whoever, the Orioles, and everybody else, and anything else, and now look at this. Yeah, I mean, you go back to the shortened season in 2020 when the Yankees were like the favorite. I mean, I remember everybody thought they were going to cakewalk, right? And that was the year the Rays beat them up in season, then beat them. There was Brasso with the homer, right? Beat him, Chapman beat him afterwards in a postseason. You can go all the way back to that. Year after year after year of, they're supposed to do this, and then they do that, and the disappointment, and the vibe and the aura just kind of not great. Now, it's kind of great. It's only 14 games into the season. I understand that. I'm not sitting there trying to overrate with you what it is. I know what it is and what it isn't. But you got to be honest with yourself. You're a Yankee hater because you're either a Yankee fan or a Yankee hater. You got to be afraid. When they're doing this and they look like this and it's without Garrett Cole, that's pretty damn impressive. Hell of a start, most impressive start in baseball, clearly, in the Bronx. Good to have you with us from start to finish or somewhere in the middle. Jump on board. The good news is you got 293, 294 now episodes to go back and listen to, and so many conversations with the Dusty Bakers and the Matt Holiday, including about his son Jackson, who now is with the Baltimore Orioles and on the biggest stage, all the way to the Ariel Hawanis, to the Rex Chapmans, to breaking down all sorts of things with the Feinstein's and the Phillips and the Duquettes, and of course the rants and the lists and the breakdowns of all sports: baseball, basketball, boxing, UFC. We get into the NFL, we get into the NBA, we get into some life. We have some fun with that as well. And it's all right there for you. So please give us a follow. Appreciate you big time. At Unfiltered with Casey Stern on YouTube, and the same thing on Instagram, of course, at Casey Stern on X or on Twitter. We will see you next time on